For my research project, I chose the Lais by Marie de France. Before we begin, I wanted to start by first introducing the author Marie de France. Marie de France was thought to have lived in the late 12th century and was born in France. Marie is a poet of her lays, which consisted of 12 short narrative written lays, and wrote them in England. Virtually nothing is known about Marie, and her geographical location is only known due to her manuscripts. According to our textbook, Marie was most likely a nun, possibly even an abbess, a female superior that had authority within her community. She lived and wrote at an unknown court, but her work was known at King Henry II's court. It is possible that in the late 12th century, the Lais were dedicated to a noble king assumed to be King Henry II or his eldest son, Henry the Young King. Certain use of terms presumes some degree of familiarity to the two, perhaps even a family relationship. The original Lays consisted of 12 poems and a prologue. However, our textbook only consists of a prologue and 2 poems, Landvale and Lostic. The prologue consists with Marie informing the reader that if God has given someone a gift of knowledge and true eloquence, that they have a duty to storytelling. For this reason, Marie writes her poems. Marie then goes on to talk about ancient writers believing it is important to write very obscurely so that readers of their work will have to study in depth. Marie took it upon herself to avoid the suffering, therefore deciding to translate Latin texts into French. After doing this, she believed that it has been done too often, so she decided to dedicate herself to telling lays that she's heard in her lifetime and believes to be very true. The first poem that is discussed in our book is Landvale. Landvale is a knight of King Arthur's table and is extremely handsome, yet very lonely. One day, Landvale falls in love with a mistress when away in the countryside. The mistress agrees to be with Landvale as long as he tells no one of their relations. When Landvale desires to see her, he is to think of a pure place and she will meet him there. When Landvale arrives back, he becomes a very generous man and bears gifts for the other knights. Later that year, King Arthur's wife attempts to seduce Landvale while he and the other knights are hanging in the garden. Landvale refuses her love due to having a woman who surpasses her beauty. Being offended, the queen tells Arthur and he puts him on trial. Since Landvale spoke of his relations with his lover, he lost her forever, and this made him really sad. Landvale did not care for his life, and if he couldn't share it without his lover, then he didn't want to live at all. When on trial, Landvale pleads guilty, calling his lover to have more beauty than the queen, and denies the attempts of seduction on his behalf. Then, the beautiful mistress came to show her face to prove her beauty surpasses the queen's, and Landvale gets to go free. Now when his mistress is leaving, Landvale leaps from a high wall, landing on his lady's horse, and the two ride together to Avalon and are never seen again. Now the last poem that our text talks about is Lostic. Lostic is about two knights. Both live next to each other, and one is married. However, the unmarried knight is in love with his neighbor's wife. Every night, the wife wakes up to leave the bed to go to the window that faces the other knight's house while they exchange love affairs. The husband grows angry that his wife leaves every night and asks why. The wife says she wakes up every night to listen to nightingales. The husband is so angry that he sends his men to kill this bird and gives it to his wife. The wife advised one of the men to give this to the neighboring knight and that he would know what this meant. When the knight received this gift, he was devastated and knew that the love affair was at its end. Now, on to my first question. So, my first question is um, if there is an original translation of Marie's Lays, and how many are there? Now, the interesting thing about the Lays is that they were purposely written as a translation of stories themselves and directed in Marie's prologue. According to the University of Florida, the Lays were possibly originally translated from Britain or possibly Welsh. Since Marie's language is Anglo-Norman, which is a dialect that's spoken amongst aristocrats in England and large parts of northern France during this time, this is what she translated her lays into. Also, during the reign of Håkon Hårkesson, king of Norway from 1217 to 1263, several translations from French literature into Old Norse were commissioned, allegedly by the king himself, one of which were a collection of lays called Stringlaker, which is translated into Book of Lays. This translated 11 lays and 10 others. The Old Norse text has been preserved in a single manuscript dated approximately 1270 in the Uppsala University Library. One of Marie's lays are Bisclorvet, which entails a story about a werewolf who's stuck in lupin form from the betrayal of his wife, and this has been adapted into several novels that is shown. Novels like The Wolf Hunt by Gillian Bradshaw, The Beauty's Beast by Edie Walker, The Tattooed Wolf by Kay Bannerman, and This Is Not a Werewolf Story by Sandra Evans. To conclude, Lais by Marie de France is a classic work of literature that discusses timeless themes. I highly recommend for future world literature students to read all 12 of her poems.